Thank you all for coming. I'm in good company, and I don't think I have to tell you how special Montauk is, okay? Let's get that right off, okay? I think there's something that gets you when you cross Napeag and it's done. You're done, okay? And this talk about Montauk starts about 1,000 years ago, or thousands of years ago, in the glacial history of Long Island and how Long Island was formed and became a terminal moraine 20,000 years ago and 6,000 years ago. So just imagine at the end of the last ice age, a 300-foot wall of ice, somewhere close to the shoreline as it stands right now, all right? And what we know about ice, we learned from the Inuits, ice has insulating properties, okay? And that's why they live in igloos in the Arctic, and they survive, okay? So it's kind of an interesting concept about this idea of a 300-foot wall of ice, and down below, there's insulation factors, okay? So the big 300-foot wall of ice is just coming down, and it's excavating, and it's crushing, and it's digging, and it's boom, boom, it's doing all this thing as time goes by, and then it reaches to the point where, by the way, they don't retreat. Glaciers don't retreat. They meet up with different climate. And that's what gets them to retreat, gets them to go back. So it's kind of an oxymoron right there. But glaciers, if it's cold enough, they go over and cover the whole globe. Okay, that's all there is to it. As soon as the weather comes up in temperature, the glaciers melt. Okay, but same with the compression of this big thing. So you can imagine, you know, so Lake Ronkonkoma gets dug out. You know, the Carmen River Basin gets dug out. Connecticut River gets dug out, as well as Fort Pond, Hidden Lake, Lake Montauk, Oyster Pond. And then as the glacier retreats, all that meltwater goes into all those deficits, and you have it right there. So the Ronkonkoma moraine comes from Lake Ronkonkoma and goes right out to Montauk Point. There's another moraine above that. But it's fascinating to think that through all that geologic history comes Long Island as we know it. So fast forward to the colonial days. Those freshwater ponds are very significant. Colonists all over New England are having a hard time getting economies going because the world ain't easy, okay? And it ain't easy for survival, and it ain't easy for mankind socially to get the mojo going so that things can be comfortable for everybody. So what it comes down to is the colonists in East Hampton, the bubbies, the locals, they had a jump start on economy, and I'll use the word economy 3 times in this talk. They had a jump start on economy because of what Montauk was, excuse me. Montauk was nothing but those glacial freshwater ponds and maritime grasses. They could bring their herds on to Montauk every year, fatten them up, and get the dough bucks for it. So they had a jump start on the economy. Colonists all over New England would have loved to have maritime grasses and freshwater like these lucky people in East Hampton did. All right, so the fact that the pasture system, as we know it, you know, developed the economy around here, and it should not be forgotten that Montauk made the East Hampton community very, very rich with maritime grasses and fresh water. It's fascinating, okay? Later on, the trees came, and then it changed landscape-wise, but initially, that was the jewel of this local area. Montauk was the jewel because it could give them the money they need to make a strong community, okay? So, 1792, the second time I used the word economy. Little known fact, it's the business people in Chamber of Commerce in New York City that petition President Washington in Philadelphia. If you don't get ships to port, our economy is going to sputter. You get ships to port, we're going to have our mojo working, and we're going to do something here. Washington, right away, got the second act of Congress and bought the land from the proprietors. The Indians have been gone, the natives have been gone, Montauk has been gone for a while. The British took over, pushed them out, and then there was all kinds of wars back and forth. But, you know, that's the way it was. The Chamber of Commerce said build it. 1792, the funds were appropriated. 1796 is when the lighthouse is built from sandstone across the Sound, barged over, horse and buggy to the top of the building. Construction starts in April, finishes in October. the proprietors had one little thing to say. They didn't like the idea the lighthouse was coming local. They had an industry in salvage, okay? So when there's a shipwreck, the locals are down there reeling it in, all right? And that was a big part. Once again, economy is difficult. You'll take it by any means, okay? So ship gets wrecked, that stuff is yours, and that's money in the bank. So it's kind of interesting that proprietors actually got the last laugh because the federal government is bigger than the locals. And they get the last laugh because the whale oil boat in 1796 ran aground in Amagansett. They they gathered the salvage and sold it back to the federal government, and it wasn't lit till the spring of 1797, excuse me. So you have a little comedy relief going on, but the proprietors got their last say. But then the lighthouse is now 222 years old, and it's a symbol of America. If you want to get a little dreamy in the history, just imagine, immigration is a real tough item to talk about in this day and age, okay? And it was back then, but immigration flowed into America. It flowed. So you can imagine a woman and a husband with a son leaving with the fear of no money, no language, no shelter. What am I going to do? And they're 5 or 6 days at sea, and they're going to Ellis Island. They know it. They don't know what the hell's going to go on. But then all of a sudden, something gets onto them, and they can't sleep, and they're on the deck of that ship coming around Montauk Point, and that boom, that beam of light zaps them. That's the first thing they see in their new country. Really cool idea. Really nice idea. So for the next 100 to 150 years, there ain't nothing going on in Montauk except historic architecture, Montauk Point Lighthouse, and the Seven Sisters, the Stanford White houses, okay? The rest of it is just maritime grasses, fresh water, and nada. No fishing industry, no tourism, just simple herds in the summertime, okay? So the first thing, actually, let's give credit right here to the first erosion control concept. This is the landmass. They put the lighthouse on the land side of Turtle Plateau. When they built it, there was 300 feet of land. This is 1878. There's about 200 feet of land. They predicted, the geologists and the architects predicted that the recession rate was about a foot a year. In 200 years, there was 200 feet lost. So they're right on the dime academically about what's going on. So I give credit to the early planners first, because if they didn't put the lighthouse here, we wouldn't be talking about the lighthouse. We wouldn't have it as our iconic local symbol. The Indians would make fires to communicate with the Indians across the way, okay? And they would make fires right on the edge here. First thing that's done proper in the erosion control specter is to set the building where it is. Way to go, guys. Gave us 150 years. The second thing that happens is post-World War II, there's a lot of testosterone, there's a lot of machines, there's a lot of U.S. Army, Corps of Engineers has a lot of stuff going on, so they build an 840-foot seawall with 15-ton stones. They did a really good job, but no modern-day acrylic fabrics behind the construction. So in the 1950s, between 50 and 4, in the East End, we had 3 hurricanes that clocked us, Hurricane Carol in 54 being memorable. And so the wave attack would come in and hit the bank. It would make milkshake out of the sediment, and the rocks would fall. So it was a failed experiment. However, if you've been to Montauk Point recently, those stones are still visible in a necklace around Montauk Point. And they served the Coast Guard in the early 90s as a way to get this revetment and this protection against wave attack going. So there's the first physical, tangible erosion control effort at Montauk Point. You notice there ain't no vegetation. This erosion control thing of bluff stabilization in the North Atlantic is all about 3 things: protecting waves, protecting against wave attack, the vegetation of the bluff face, and then you have underground streams of groundwater seepage that are insidious. They just never stop, 365 days a year, 24/7. They weaken the terminal edge of the sediment here, and that's where erosion is a little bit faster, okay? So 3 things have to happen. No one knows that, okay? And so 46, the lighthouse is on its own. There ain't no money coming back to it because there ain't no comprehensive plan. until 1967, the Coast Guard, because of the Vietnam War, expenditures that they didn't want any part of, they want nothing to do with historic preservation, they want nothing to do with erosion control, they're for search and rescue. We can put a steel tower right back down here in the parking lot and get by, let them keep the mariners safe. And they were principally, they were often running that, okay? They were going to board the lighthouse up in '67. Enter Dan Retina. Dan has always these foo-foo contests left and right all over. They're quite interesting and they're quite foolish. But they get you. His publication gets you, okay? And he's got a sense of humor to boot. So he stages the first Montauk Point Lighthouse light-in on a rainy August day in 1967. Unheard of. People dropped what they were doing and came to the lighthouse for a candlelight vigil to save the lighthouse. Coast Guard wouldn't even let them on the property. So they had it right outside the gate. Enter 4'10" in high heel sneakers, Georgina Reed, living in Jackson Heights, okay? Textile designer, author of a successful book on photography. Not a coastal anything. As the story goes, in '62, if you know your storms, you have the 38 hurricane, the Easter Sunday nor'easter of '62, and Sandy. Those are the three prevalent top-level storms that we've had in the last 80, 90 years. So '62 comes by, and Georgina has her dream house in Rocky Point. It's a 100-foot sand embankment, nothing like the glacial till that exists here. This is compacted by the glacier. This stuff is actually quite resistant toward erosion because of the compaction and the clay and the cobbles and the boulders that are in there. If you take a ride on the ferry across the Sound and you look at the north shore of Plum Island, you'll see 100-ton glacial erratics, they're called, all right? And in Montauk, we don't have many 100 tons, but those stones that are locked into the glacier, once again, that big ice-moving thing, taking every rock, boom, boom, and compressing it all, and then when it gets to the shoreline, it gets exposed, and these things drop one after another after another. Next time you're on the ferry, go check out those stones on the north side of Plum Island. They're huge. I was working on the hillside on East Lake Drive, and Pat Bistrian was on a site doing the excavation, and there was a 150-ton erratic in the earth that was above the house. And so now here was a modern problem for the contractor. Okay, what are we going to do about it? Bistrian brought in a jackhammer. Didn't work. Could move it? No. 150 ton? No way. All right? So the thing's sitting there. The house is below. So what does Bistrian do? Brilliant guy. He starts digging and digging and digging below elevation. The rock falls in the hole. He covers it over. Forgotten about. Okay? So the fact that, you know, these 150-ton things are being moved and moved and moved, and now the thing recedes, and you have some of those natural stones in the muck here and there. Matter of fact, you look over here to this photograph. This photograph right here is pre-Corps of Engineers at the lighthouse. Look at that beach right there. All those cobbles I'm talking about, that array of stones. Some great stuff. So this is a failure, and then Georgina gets Dan Retina's little newspaper. All right, Georgina, right? Boy, oh boy. I knew her well. I worked with her. We sparred, we battled. But she patented her method and then wrote a book, How to Hold Up a Bank. What do you say about that? All right? She had it. And more so than anything, more than the engineers that helped me out today with this project, she was a soil economist on that bluff face. It's real difficult to start doing terraces, and then all of a sudden you get into a deficit of soil. She would know how to start a project. She would start a project in the middle and start her terraces, all because she knew that the soil economy, she was going to need that soil here or there to fill these terraces. And I just stood back and looked. I said, no one knows this about this girl, but she's quite a wizard. She's more than an engineer, but she's not an engineer. So that's where Georgina comes in. CCOM. $1,000 down, 1970. I'm sure the Coast Guard engineers had a lunchroom chuckle that day when this girl came in and said, I can do that. Because this is what she was looking at. That's where she started, right here. So the Coast Guard looked at her and said, yeah, maybe, yada, yada, yada. But because it wasn't coming out of their pocket, they gave it to the concerned citizens. Georgina's board terrace, tongue and groove cedar. Her support stakes, untreated spruce pickets. And she starts on the bluff face. And then she takes some perennial ryegrass and puts it in her terraces. Boom, boom, boom. And lo and behold, She greens the embankment the first summer up to an elevation. Wow. Concerned citizens are psyched. Coast Guard's curious. More money from the concerned citizens. 2 summers, she does a swath all the way up to the top. Digging like a mole and climbing like a goat with all volunteers. How about that one? One time the commandant of the Coast Guard said, go down and help Miss Reed, she needs your help. He had a size 22 foot. Her terrace is rolling like this. The poor guy comes down to help, and she says, the first expletive she ever used in her life, get the out of here. Yeah, but my boss, no, go do something else. So with the volunteers and the Phragmites Reeds, that's where it comes from. Reed Trench Terracing. She's not ego. It's not named after her name. It's named after the Phragmites Reeds that she used behind the board terrace to keep the sediment from falling out. She discovered that in 1962 when she lost 1/3 of her land during the nor'easter of 62. All right? And what am I going to do? Well, she goes down the beach and she sees the gully, she sees the Phragmites, she sees the lumber, puts it together, terrace. Ah, patent, book. And she starts doing her own embankment. And she greens her own embankment, not knowing that she was up for this lighthouse thing. But as soon as she read Dan Rettina's thing, she came to the rescue. And under comic relief and a little bit of money here and there, she greened the embankment. It was in the late 70s where some of the plant botanists in University of Pennsylvania made a beach grass that adapted to heavier soils called Cape American. And I had gotten that. I gave it to Georgina, and I said, Georgina, look, your terraces ain't going to last long. Put this stuff in. And lo and behold, right now you can see some of Georgina's board terraces from 1970 still sitting there, awfully crumbly, but the plant material survives 6, 7 hurricane strength rains a year, all because it's a network of roots and a network of plant tops. Georgina had arrived, okay? She made this thing happen. So there's no protection against wave attacks, so engineering-wise, what Georgina has going is a whim, because it ain't going to last. Montauk Historical Society takes over a lease in '86 for a museum in the 1860 building, not knowing that the Coast Guard eventually wants the hell out, not knowing even how to make a museum, not having the money. But they go through year by year, and it gets better, it gets better. Just so happens Paul Simon lives down the block, and the romance of that light in his bedroom is something that appeals to him. He's connected to the lighthouse every night when he goes to bed. Doesn't know it, but he's practicing at the West Hampton Police Academy for his 2nd annual Graceland tour with all his Pan-African band, 20, 30 people on stage. And I'm not in the Historical Society there. I'm a hill ape doing my things at Stonehouse and, here or there. And Dick White says, we gotta do some fundraising. Let's have some clam bakes. So 20 people volunteer, and we net $800 after a weekend of some hard work. That would buy you 1 or 2 rocks. So it's looking pretty bleak, pretty glim, okay? But Dick, consummate businessman, so he just throws it out. Talks to Rusty Lever. Do you think Paul would give us a hand? He's here in the neighborhood. Yes, okay, the first Back at the Ranch concert netted $585,000 of private money for the Lighthouse. Hallelujah. This greenback starts to get excited now, okay? Not knowing the function of government, all right? And not knowing how the federal government functions, let alone the state government, let alone state parks. Man, oh man, I'll tell you. So what happens is the concert gives us the money. How do we spend it? I said, you're going to need surveys and topos. We give Billy Walsh the job, local the job. He's out there, he gets the topo right away, all right? I go and get 5-year permits from the DEC. So we got these things, but we got nowhere to go. And then Hurricane Bob comes in and obliterates some of Georgina's tow protection in Gabions that the Coast Guard did. So it even looked worse for the future of this place because there's nothing on engaging, okay? And there's no tow protection and protection against wave attack. And so what happens is Simon gives us the concert. Simon is at a wedding of Richard Avedon, who lives on the bluffs next to Peter Beard. And his son is marrying Senator Moynihan's daughter, Maura. And Simon is a midget, and Moynihan is tall. I'm sure the hit came below the rib. I'm raising $500,000 for the lighthouse. What are you doing? Moynihan is on the Corps of Engineer Committee. Moynihan goes back to Washington after the weekend, after the wedding, and gets $450,000 for the lighthouse. And I'm starting to skip rope here. I'm saying, wow, we got 600 grand. We got another 450. We're having rocks on the beach. And they looked and they said, look, love your passion, love your sense of humor, but sit down, because this is not how the federal government works. The 450 is for a reconnaissance study, an inch of paper that's going to tell the federal government if the Montauk Point Lighthouse is worthy of federal expenditures. And my blood pressure is about here, okay? And I'm saying, are you kidding me? And they said again, we love your sense of humor. You're a part of this. Just shut up until we can get over this hump. So then the feds are on the job for the first time. And then Hurricane Bob comes in and takes out a whole portion of the gabions, which were only, kind of pseudo-engineering to get Georgina through. And that's where the whole thing started, okay? Because we're on the log with the feds, they could turn to the Coast Guard, and reluctantly, the Coast Guard said, all right, we'll do it. Maintenance funds for the lighthouse. And they get a contract for 488 going. And in the middle of the construction, we get the nor'easter of 92. It takes about, a good section of their work apart, gives them an extra. And for $688,000, they come in and do 400 feet. I say to George Larson, he's the state park manager. He's a maverick in the state system. He knows I'm a maverick. We get along pretty good. And he says, what do you want to do? So I gave him, he says, you're an honest guy. Let's go. How can I help? I said, George, you go back and get some stone through your system in the state. You buy the stone. You spend $1 on stone. I'll spend $1 on setting stone, because now I'm a big shot with $500,000, $600,000 in the bank, okay? And Larson says, okay. 3 weeks later, he comes back and says, how's 10,000 ton? I got you $300,000 worth of stone. Later on, they gave another $250. So the state park system gave $550 in stone, $688 from the feds for a portion of it, and then the money that I had to set the stone all the way around. The biggest revetment on Long Island is complete. Here it is right here. When Hurricane Sandy came, this is elevation 25. It hit us at 30. This meadow over here, the debris field was over the meadow. The Atlantic Ocean went over the whole top of this. On a $1.7 million protection, we had $45,000 worth of repairs. 5 days of work with me and Patrick Bistrian. And now the engineers on the federal level are starting to say, methods look like they're solid. But they used the 46 work here because they couldn't engineer it. It cost $1 million to engineer it. We only had $450,000 for, quote, maintenance for the Coast Guard, okay? Big problem here, because slope angles on a wall and a seawall that's going to last have to be like this. We get a slope angle like this. Lo and behold, it lasts 25 years mostly. It's falling apart right now. But we go on from reconnaissance to feasibility study. Feasibility is the actual engineering before it goes to bid. So they're doing it in the late 90s, and all of a sudden it stops because the Coast Guard says we want out. So the Historical Society takes over the property. They own the Montauk Point Lighthouse except for the function of the light and the foghorn. Coast Guard is gone. It's our baby. Best thing that ever happened to the lighthouse. Because the gathering of funds at the gate, pay for this, pay for that. And through the course of time, we made our wall knowing that there's going to be some more help coming in. But because the Coast Guard came out, there's always a quotient of fed, state, and local on any project. The octogenarians at the table, the MHS, are not a municipality. There's an archaic law. So when 2007 comes in, for them to use the $1.2 million of engineering to get this wall right, the thing goes into the trash can. It goes on the shelf because the Montauk Historical Society can't be the local sponsor. What do you mean we can't be the local sponsor? We got more heart than you guys. Are you kidding me? You can't be the local sponsor, case closed. So the study goes on shelf. So we're sitting there, and the Little Leaguer is going to keep up the best he could. Hurricane Sandy comes down the pike. New York District Corps of Engineers gets $60 billion. Is there anything shovel-ready? Call Donohue. You bet I want to do this again. What are you, crazy? Yeah. But we got to get over that real estate hump. Okay, we'll try. We tried to partner. We wouldn't partner with the town of East Hampton because 2-year terms. No. We tried to partner with state parks. The Long Island region said, great. We worked like a champ. As soon as I got out to Albany, yeah. We'll sign the contracts, but we want $1 million in escrow so it doesn't cost us any money. Now, $1 million in escrow? I mean, we have $1 million business, but it costs us $1.1 million a year to run this place. What are you talking about? So it's sketchy. I call Fred Thiel for the third time. Hey, Fred, can you go get that law repealed so that we can move on with this? I'm going to try, Greg. You know, it's not a good political climate, but I'm going to try. Couldn't do it for the other time, but guess what happens? He sits down with Cuomo and the DEC officials, and they sit down and talk. We can't repeal that law that's preventing this, but what we can do, we can make a new law. As in the case of a National Historic Landmark, no local sponsor needed. Fed state paying $24 million for the new thing. That's the answer. We get our engineering, keep this building here for 100 years. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you how a particular portion of this part and all our wall was built, and it's going to be a slideshow that's going to take us on through the end of this, and then we'll open it up for questions and all that kind of stuff. But let's get the shades down if we can, and maybe get the lights dimmed. And there again, we're going to give credit to the early planners. They put that building on the land side of Turtle Plateau, and you can see why it's called Turtle Plateau and Turtle Cove. Just a little nuance, naturally, that just came in and stuck. Okay, then down below is the 1838 Keeper's House. Here is the 1860 Keeper's House. And this predates, of course, that little gem in the middle, which is now the Oceans Institute. But here we go with my generation of erosion control at Montauk Point. Dig it. Untouched. Okay? This is before World War II. You don't see any fire tower up there, okay? Where's Georgina when you need her? There's our wall that the pic on the easel shows. That's the 840-foot Corps of Engineer work in 46. Now, the engineer work in 46 is still there, if you can see it. It's not toppled yet, all right? It's actually holding its own, all right? This is World War II was on us. There's a bunker. They had to protect the Brooklyn Navy Yard, all right? That's why the military came in the 40s. Brooklyn Navy Yard was all about everything for the war effort. So they took over the whole place, and then here comes the military history. Matter of fact, here's the old fog signal building. That's our Oceans Institute right now. But you see the military in there, the feds on the project, but you see what the bluff looked like just after World War II. Quite a danger to walk under those slopes. Once again, the bunker is still up top, but not for long. See that little crown, that little helmet right by the flagpole there? That's the lookout, the anti-German lookout. And that's now down on the beach. But the seawall now, if you noticed, is in disarray. It's not the same shape as it was before, and the slope angles are real steep. This is a Peter Beard picture, all right? Meet Georgina Reed once again, all right? Great juxtaposition. Look at that glacial till, the rills from heavy rains, and her terrace method, all right? And her soil economy trip. She's saving soil behind the air for some terraces over there, but that's remarkable. I'm talking tongue and groove cedar. Who would have thought, who would ever think you put tongue and groove cedar in a project like this? And who would use spruce pickets, untreated? Nobody but Georgina. But the embankment gets greened in 2 summers. 4'10" in high heels. Author of a book on photography. Textile designer. Not a coastal expert. All right, now, that slope angle is significant right there. It may not mean a lot to you, but it means a lot to me. That's a 1-to-1 slope angle. And at the top where that flagpole is where our Lost at Sea monument is. So Georgina drew a line in the sand, and if she hadn't drawn a line in the sand, that wouldn't be a 1-to-1 slope still. It would be, storms hit it, okay, it gets steep again. And that's the way the recession works, okay? The storms take the bottom out, climate and gravity, the storms come, climate, gravity makes the stuff fall to the bank. It's like cotton candy in your mouth. The bluffs are actually resistant toward erosion, but when the big waves come up, it's like cotton candy in your mouth, they just go away with no explanation. But that slope angle is significant because that's the same as it is today. The bunker's on the beach. The slope angles are hideously steep. And she's working around the corner. That's her picture. She gave me a bunch of stuff. Her hoe, her camera. It's in the museum. See that shoreline right there? So the glacier stops, you know, Long Island is like this. And the glacier stops right here. So of course the moorland is going to be manipulated and governed by the glacial activity. But the rest of Long Island is dune geology. It's just beach. So when you get to the end of this bay point, which basically stops at Ditch, the dune geology starts at Hither Woods and goes all the way to Brooklyn. So this little genre, this site-specific thing that Georgina is working in, is actually a 7-mile stretch of unusual shoreline. There ain't no shoreline like it all the way down to the tips of South America. It's very unique. Up in Maine, Connecticut, the shorelines are rocky, more rocky. There are some coastal things close. Faulkner's Island is a lighthouse, 1803 Thomas Jefferson Lighthouse that I worked on. Similar, but Montauk has this little shoreline, and it's all because of the concentration of rocks in those points, arbitrarily laid out by the glacier. I love that word arbitrary because that's what nature is. Absolutely arbitrary every day. All right, there's a view of the gabions that gave Georgina her tow protection and the seawall of the 1946 era. And there's the bunker on the beach. Those gabions lasted on this end over here 20 years, but I'm going to show you what happened to those gabions. They're just not engineered properly for this site. They knew it. Coast Guard knew it, but they didn't have the funds to really go hit a home run, so they just did that. Here's where I came in. Georgina stopped right there, and then I had to look at that vertical mess on state park property. So actually, when you work on this stuff, you actually become a sculptor. You know, you have to sculpt and dig to get your proper slope angle. You can't succeed with a terrace slope angle like this, or like this, or like this, or like this. You got to lay that thing back. It means moving a lot of material. And then here is my terrace method. Now, Georgina had the reed trench terracing. I have the Donna reed. If you're a TV buff, I had the Donna reed trench terracing, okay? And then so with me, I use 6-foot heavy gauge U-posts. And then, so I didn't have to go to the chiropractor over and over again. I got myself a demolition hammer and then made a collar bit and then right into the clay. Next day, like this. So we got good at it, okay? And it was just another way of doing that section. Like I said, site-specific. That section of the bluff is real steep. And you can see there's Daniel Crowley, and you can see us digging and sculpting our line of terraces into that bluff. Had a good crew. And I got the word the other day that, you know, OSHA is now on the site, and they want everyone working on the bluff to be tethered with a leash and have a hard hat on. And I said, uh-oh, it looks like I'm a heretic. Okay. So there you go. There's me working on with my crew, and I'm doing my style terraces right down from where Georgina left off. This is 1990. And you can see my temporary, the wisdom of Georgina, that soil economy. This dude up here is digging soil and throwing them over into that temporary terrace so I have some soil. And we got to get in here, and we got to sculpt our way right on through this stuff. I have a camera on my hip all the time, and look what was revealed. Fascinating. That's the sediment that I dug into. The clays, the silt, the iron ore, the clays, the silt, the topsoil. I'm glad I had my camera, because that's never to be seen again. Once again, the arbitrariness of the glacial till is that you have impenetrable clay. All right, and it leads up into a segment of just sand and cobbles and goes back to clay. Go figure. Who made that program? I don't know. But that's how arbitrary this whole movement of glacial and ice is. It's a really fantastic thing. This is the iron ore right here. And actually, my terraces fit right in. You can even see that my terraces were part of the art scheme here. That's a joke. Just arbitrary. Little cobbles, big cobbles. Those areas are quite fragile, where the stones and the sand are. And then my guys, that's the Cape American, in the steep terrace, without the helmets and without the harnesses. and there you go. We're off and running. Now the thing about planting Cape American, and I also put down a little bit of clover as a nitrogen fixer, and I use fescue so it won't take over the Cape American. The thing about it is that those plant tops, when a 100-mile-an-hour storm comes by, those plant tops get obliterated, but they just desiccate and pop right up again tomorrow. All right? It's a great future with Cape American. Not to mention, when the fall comes and the shore goldenrod and all the seed pool gets in the air and blows down, those plant tops catch it for the first time, drop right into a horizontal terrace. You should see the goldenrod all over this stuff. I'd like to give myself credit for planting it. I just watched it for the last 25 years. And it's remarkable how the goldenrod, which is as deep-rooted and as successful as the Cape American, is all a volunteer. Beautiful stuff. And now it's all over the bloody place. So there's Georgina's gabions. All right? And we got some storms coming up here now. You want me to talk about storms, okay? The early 90s. So we have Hurricane Bob, August 19th, 1991. Category 1, nothing to write home about. In 20 minutes, it was hitting Providence, all right? Just boom. It was really nothing to really be scared about, but it did come in and rattle the gabions, and you can see those cages get beat up. There's the Corps of Engineers stone out in front. The gabions, the Corps of Engineers gave them some foundation, and the gabions were Georgina's protection against waves. That was a Coast Guard expenditure. Now comes the creme la creme. 91 again. 2 months later. We called it the Halloween no-name nor'easter. And then Sebastian Junger wrote that beautiful book about the perfect storm, about the low. You know, westerlies take lows and they move them right out of sight. Right, they're gone. Well, there was one low that stayed, and then another low was over here and pushed it right down, and a high came in, and that thing came right in. So a low came from way above the Gulf of Maine and came back. And nor'easters are worse than hurricanes because there's 1, 2, sometimes 3 high tide events where you're going to get schnockered. Okay, and it's going to be relentless. So there's the result of the perfect storm. The gabions are tattered. We're back to zero. It's not fun. Sometimes, you know, it's like Wall Street. Now I'm beginning to lose my equity. I'm starting to get a little knock-kneed right now. Okay, I'm losing my equity. Hello, people. I'm losing my equity. What's happening here? Can the federal government help? All right. This is after. So here I am at high tide with all my, you know, I guess the chutzpah and the spirit from Georgina got into my veins. I'm filming at high tide at 6 o'clock. The next high tide is 6 a.m. I'm there at 6 a.m. And the land I was standing on, we lost 30 foot in one night. Okay? Over top the gabions, and that's Bobby Van Velser. Now there's a 30-foot gap, and I'm saying, we're in trouble. We're in trouble until the Coast Guard finally comes along with their 488 and then their 688. And stones are set deliberate. There's a stone setter that knows the shape of the hole, the shape of the stone, and there's a crane operator or an excavator operator that'll place it just like a cotton ball. And they're set kissing on 3 or 4 sides, whatever. And some good stone setters. 25,000 ton is in that wall. The new wall, incidentally, is 63,900 tons coming our way. There's a nice before and after. And I'm proud of this one is because Jamie Walsh, Bruce McCarthy, Mark Edwards, Greg Donohue, and Danny Crowley are the crew. I said, I'm going local. Forget it. We're going local. We're going to get everybody from the Shagwan and come out here and you work under my tutelage and we'll do just fine, okay? And we'll be at the Shagwan for lunch, okay? But no. So I get these hill apes alongside with me, and this is what we did. This is post 91, perfect storm. It's a wreck. 30 feet lost in one night. We get the money and we start our mojo working. I worked first on the south side. Then the feds came in, the Coast Guard came in and did their thing with Rambo. Firebird was the constructor. Rambo was the subcontractor, and those guys were great stone setters. And this is the stuff that the locals did right here. In fact, that wall hasn't shifted anything since '93. and it's in good shape. And we made, Dick White and I were at a meeting in Congressman George Hochbruckner's office. And I said, you know, there's a high value of recreation at this place. Can we put a sidewalk or a walkway in for pedestrians in the state park and for recreation? Yes, we'll call it a bench. It's the most used thing at the Lighthouse now. We have thousands of people every year walk that thing, boom, boom, boom. So we put in a bench at elevation 16 to 18, and it was a great component. And it was, once again, the local hill apes that had that idea. It's funny because the Lighthouse represents an incredible, and I'm a cynic as far as government. You can spit me out and put me in the back seat, okay? I just don't like the way it works. I just think it could be run better, being a self-employed businessman. But the civilian government alliance since day one here, starting with Georgina, is something that is very, very special because it's not always the big boys leading the way. It's 4'10" Georgina. And things get done. Sometimes 1 step forward, 2 back. Sometimes 3 steps forward, 1 back. Not even knowing where it's going. But the combination, the luck quotient, and the combination of good people working on this, and we'll give credit to the Montauk Historical Society. I'll tell you what, they've been stellar in the trust and the vision and understanding where this is going to go. Because if you have a museum up top and you don't do this first, you're limited in scope, okay? So the bluff is stabilized, and Georgina is the heroine. The Historical Society has got a future, but there's one problem. In the Coast Guard effort in the early 90s, they didn't have the money to engineer it. So the wall sits with a slope angle like this, 10-ton boulders. And when you know something about hydrodynamics and what water can do, the waves come in and attack. They may jiggle that stone a little bit, but that water's got to go back. So it gets jiggled again. Right now, there's a 100-foot section where the lower slope stones, not on my work, but around the corner, are coming apart. And unless we have this new thing that's coming our way, it would be the end of recreation and fishing around the bottom of Montauk Point. We'd have to fence it off and say there's a fallen rock zone, it's too dangerous. In fact, there was a fatality in March. Young man, Aaron, his first name was Aaron. He was a sous chef interviewing at Gurney's. He was a fisherman, loved it. The surf was up that day, and he took a walk. And he got washed off the wall and he died. And the surfers were good enough to talk to me and communicate with me. And they said, oh, so-and-so has a picture of him. I said, can you get me that picture? Can you give me the name? I get the picture and I give it to the kid's mom. I'm in the family right now because it really, really made her feel good and made all of us feel good. But the guy got washed off the wall. So safety right now is a concern. And so it's a little bit of a race. There's the Rambo. Look how much underlayer stone goes into that area, right? Look at all that stone, which you can see when wave attack comes in, all right? It hits those big stones, the capstone, and then it's just like a big drain and goes out. Meanwhile, the filter cloth is back over here protecting the sediment. There's the filter cloth right up top. That stuff is sensitive towards sunlight and petroleum products, so it's got to be buried. And where it is right now is a good spot for it because it's buried. There's my friend Bruce McCarthy from our era on the north side putting in the filter cloth together. Thank you, Bruce. It's the cheapest component and probably the most important. And there's my group with the excavator. I preferred to work with an excavator than a crane. And we're working on the north side right there. That's about a 7-tonner coming in the hole. There's the toe, all-important toe. That's our foundation. My friend Daniel Crowley walking on the 7-tonners, 8-tonners. If that doesn't move, then your wall ain't moving. We spent extra time putting those stones in. Now, storm sequence. There's my friend Daniel. He's not with us anymore, but he was a big part of my team and a good guy. His butt's sitting about elevation 19 right now, above sea level. Something like that. So here's the sequence. It's probably the nor'easter of 92, as I remember, December, 3 days once again. This is all one view. Now the bunker is halfway gone, and now the bunker is nowhere, all right? And that's a little storm. Although the trouble with that, it was 3 high tides. You get nailed. If you're unprotected, you get nailed. You got to be ready for that. The 3 high tides, you got to be ready. But I wanted to give you a basis of really what happens. The nor'easter yesterday alarmed me in downtown Montauk. I went to look, and all I saw was, I saw a river, a wall of water moving west. A lot of it was not hitting the beach, but the movement of the water was outstanding. And here you see a little bit of that. The whole cove is filled up. And there's almost no defense when it wants to do what it wants to do. And then we're finishing up my wall on that side. 25,000 ton delivered, 30, 35 ton at a time. I signed every slip for the truckers over the course of 5 years. Never had a truck injured. It's a lot of stone coming off. Sometimes the stone inventory for a stone setter it gets a little tense because if you don't have a lot of stone, you can't make choices. And sometimes I'd see that truck go up, I'd see the bed go up, and I'd see that rock in the middle. I'd say, that's it, boom, go down and get it. Okay, turn it this way, boom, boom, right in the hole. And there's an audible. When a stone is set right, there's an audible. You know that it's there. But the methods work, by and large. All right? That's pre-Georgina. You can see how the wave attack overtopped the bluff face and separated the 1946 wall from the bluff face. You see the particularly site-specific shoreline of the Montauk moorland, the glacial bluffs. That's a great shot right there. And, once again, that slope angle 1-to-1, and that's where the loss at sea. Are we controlling erosion? Yes, we are. Matter of fact, we're writing a book on it.
Wow.
Okay? 25,000 ton of stone later. Sandy hit us where that fence line is. This pine tree at this particular point, 20 years later, is about 20 feet tall. It died from salt intrusion. Those two before and afters are significant, and then down on my side, this is my resume. You see the bunker on the beach. You see a fairly respectable slope angle around the corner due east, but then you're getting into a slope angle that's near impossible. A lot of digging and a lot of luck, and there we are. That's today. So we've shown the way to the engineers. I've been working with some of them for 26 years, and we've gotten over one hump after another. The biggest one being this local sponsor thing. That was huge. The feds in the state paying for this. Why not? It's a National Historic Landmark. I mean, we did run into a bump in the road with surfers. They said, move it, you're going to ruin our break. Okay, I'm your friend. You're the most underrated athletes in the world. Go get your pro bono engineers and let's sit down and have a talk. No talk, just insistent. Move the lighthouse, move the lighthouse, move the lighthouse. So, 6 years, and Eleanor Earhart is our point person. A salary to Robert Hefner, maybe $50,000, $60,000 over 6 years. We tried to become a National Historic Landmark many times. Even George Washington's name was not enough. Sorry, that's not enough. What are you talking about? It's not enough. No, sorry. We go this time, and Robert Hefner he's got both 6 guns. He's ready to go. He goes and gets the bills of lading from 1797 to 1870 and says, we were put here to help the economy of a growing nation. We get a 9-0 unanimous decision, National Historic Landmark, not to be moved. Thank you. Okay, conscious and deliberate for us to really find our way here. So the locals find their way. The civilian alliance, the civilian government alliance that was created long ago gets stronger and stronger. They see the need for $24 million. It's in the bank. There's another $1.7 billion for New York State. They have in their vision the idea that this place is worthy. And yes, this place did, in fact, have a lot to do with the growth of a nation. Thank you, Robert Hefner, for bringing it to the fore. Because now we would hope that will work for us with grants, with fundraising. We're trying a whole bunch of things to keep this 222-year-old lighthouse. Not only do we have to juggle the maintenance of the revetment, we have a 222-year-old lighthouse that we have to come up with money for. So, in fact, it's working. And like Stymie said to our Falcon, I don't know where we're going, but we're on our way. And the MHS is a worthy owner and collaborator. And the feds and state parks, DEC, have been on this. And I have to say one thing. It occurs to me, knowing these people as long as I do, that some of the stuff and the passion that we're about drips off onto these guys. These guys are just doing government contracts, you know. But they show up twice a year in our presence, and we're communicating 5 times a month. And the more and more they see what we're about and how honest and judicious we are with our moving forward here, it kind of gets them, man. It kind of gets them, and they move in, and they're like bobbleheads. Just like the octogenarian lady said, yes, I guess we have to take it. We're Montauk Historical Society, after everyone said no. Because when a federal installation is excised, they have to have every person in the federal government, every agency say, do you want it? Say yes or no. And no one, not even the people running the Fire Island Light, said, we don't want anything to do with that. Why? Because of the historic preservation. That belongs to those Montauk people. But the erosion control? No way. It's not possible. Then it goes to the state level. State Parks owns the concession, the parking lot, and 2 pieces of land on either side. We don't want nothing to do with that, baby. Then it goes to the county level. This is the protocol. That's like Comedy Central, Suffolk County. I mean, come on. Come on. Oh, God. And then it goes to the town. It's the symbol of the East Hampton has the lighthouse on it. We'd love to, but honestly, we're just not capable. And then it goes to the octogenarian ladies at the Montauk Historical Society, bobbleheads. I guess we have to take it. We're a historical society, not even knowing where they're going. And look where we are right now. We have 105,000 visitors a year. We have the Oceans Institute right now, which is a program that's going to talk about the health of the oceans and the planet for future, get the kids involved. We're a most worthy historical society, most worthy owners of this place, and we have a lot of work to do. That's all I got to say. But that's it. So I appreciate you guys listening, and you got to admit, of all the municipalities on Long Island, there's not too many storylines like this. I tell you that. Okay.
Great one.
Any questions? What the hell you doing next? How can you top that?
How much stuff did you lose yesterday?
Nothing.
Because I've lived on my street for 50 years now, and the waves from east to west yesterday were the largest faces I ever saw. And I texted a friend in East Hampton. I said, I got 15-foot faces in front of my house going this way. And later that evening, Channel 12 put a wave map up and put 19 next to Montauk. We had waves of 19
Wow, right.
at the shore, not somewhere offshore, somewhere. I mean, I've surfed 12 at Ditch Plains right back when in my youth. 19 is another world.
Yeah, right.
It's another world.
Right.
If you got through yesterday, God bless you, because yesterday was serious stuff.
And that's
maybe not 3 tides, but
Yeah.
height.
Was
actual
there.
Height. They're breaking. It was just-
Well, that I don't have conflict with surfers. They're the most underrated athletes in the world. I'll tell you that right now. Anybody who can dance on a 19-foot wave and just make it look like nothing, they belong. Okay, but
Some of us are ex.
I went down and I was good enough to meet Kim and Dave on the wall this morning, and I went down there with some police tape, thinking that these rocks that have separated from the lower slope, that this storm would pull them down, and then our recreation is a fallen rock zone. I have to be sensitive toward that. I have to know when to pull the plug on that before someone gets killed. I was down there not too long ago, and there's a Hispanic kid looking for lures. He's looking for lures between the space between 2 rocks, and that's a 10-ton stone like this. I said, do you want to see your mom tonight? I said, you shouldn't be down there. He had no idea. So, you know, this chase right now with the 24 million and everything, we're this close. We have a water quality meeting coming up on the 14th of November, and then the colonel can sign this, and the agreements can be signed, and then it goes out to contract. So, you know, I'm just sitting around hoping and praying that we can get this thing through and take it from there. Brian?
This next phase starts where?
The next phase starts, it's going to end someplace right about here. They have to integrate with the town of East Hampton stuff that I did in '97, and it goes all the way around pretty much all the sides. It's 1,000 feet linear.
Same height that's there now or higher?
No, all different. Bottom slope angle from toe, 2-to-1 slope. They had it 3-to-1, which is better, But then I open my big mouth and I'm saying, how am I gonna do the maintenance with a 12-foot wide bench to lift 15-ton stones? I mean, you're gonna invent a machine for me that's gonna do that? No, you need a bigger bench. So it took them 3 weeks, I was amazed. They came back and they reduced that to 2.5 to 1, put a 20-foot bench at elevation 10 for fishermen and for maintenance, and then it goes up on a 2-to-1 slope to elevation 21 with a 20-foot bench, and then goes up to 35. They're taking it up 5 feet further for the 73-year protection.
So what's visible now would be invisible?
That rock's being taken apart 80 feet at that time and reused.
I see.
They were gonna build over this, but that doesn't make any sense. The rock is, most of it's good, just reuse it.
So the new plan is basically to use this, basically the same wall but with bigger stones?
Yes.
Okay,
2 courses of 15-ton stones coming from the toe.
okay.
It's going out 43 feet. Comes out on a 2-to-1.
And it's right, and how far does that go out right now?
Well, that goes out into the 1946 work. That's the rocks in the sand. Those 46 rocks are gonna be covered up by a lot of stone above it.
Okay.
And the fishermen have to be told, get the hell out for 2 years. They don't like that. But on the end of it, they're going to have a world-class pedestal for their fishing. They'll be closer, they'll be safer, and we hope the fishermen will be happy.
Now, as far as this, because I don't understand, will this affect the surf and break that they're worried about?
Well, the work I did in '92, like I said, Alamo broke 3 times a year. Alamo didn't even have a name in the '80s, in the '70s. It had a name in the '80s because it broke 3 times. Surfers are clever with their names, okay? And then all of a sudden, I did the work in '92, and all of a sudden Alamo was breaking 18 times a year. So it's been put into the wave tank. The idea is that wave reflection is not going to be overbearing. Ask Aaron Chichunian, he's the local coastal geologist, he said the same thing. Some of the surfers say no, 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 but they never really showed up with anything
So
substantial.
they're worried about backwash?
They were about wave reflection,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
Wave reflection and coming in and affecting.
But that's only gonna happen like on the most gigantic days, right?
And it might make it better for some swells. You know, it's all direction this way. The bottoms change all the time, so surf breaks change all the time. So it's not a science where you can just push a button.
But like on mediums, the smaller days, there won't be any.
There won't be any,
From
right.
reach or rock.
Right.
And how long is the work supposed to take?
2 years. Hardy har on that. I've worked out there in winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the stones have to be set 43 out. There's a toe stone right there. Would you please tell me how you're going to dance that program?
Right.
Okay. I've got some ideas, but it's interesting, very interesting. But no, once again, I said that some of this love interest and some of this passion has dripped off. Coastal contracts, low bidder, you're in. Come on, let's figure it out together. No need for low bid. Experience counts. So you're going to have some of the biggest marine companies in the world coming in and bidding this. You're not going to have a goofball like me coming in and say, I can do that, okay? So we're protected as far as that goes.
My parents, well, me and my sister out here in the late 60s and early 70s, and there was the article about Georgina Reed in Dan's paper. And I'm really glad you're doing this because what she did is so important and it's gone beyond the high tide mark. I retired from the State Department of Transportation, and 15 years ago we had people coming and saying, we can stabilize bridges, slopes on rivers and streams using vegetation and rock. And I don't know if there's a direct line from Georgina to Dave Rosgren and Dave Derrick, but when I heard that, it's like, of course you can. Georgina Reed wrote a whole book about it, so it's really important work. And I'm glad that you've not only been doing this to go to the future, but make sure we don't forget about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And what a wonderful opportunity, the luck quotient. There's a ghost here named Abigail. That girl is working. She's been working since the first time she met Georgina, okay? Get in there, Georgina, and do it. And the promotional, she didn't need any promotion. She just basically, get out of my way, all right? And my word of the highway. And that prevailed for a long, long time, and it worked for her.
There's another thing, this is like real vegetation trivia, but College of Environmental Science and Forestry up in Syracuse found a highly salt tolerant version of goldenrod along Interstate 81 going south of Syracuse. And I don't know what kind you get down here, but it's very salty up in Onondaga County. I'm wondering if that would be invasive or if you could use that.
My mailbox is 795 Montauk. You send me every rootstock you can, and we'll make it work, I guarantee. Way to go for bringing that in, right? And why would it be salty up in central New York? That's curious.
There's just a lot of salt deposits there. They call it
Okay.
Syracuse the Salt City.
I see. Okay.
I mean, it's not like down here, but still.
Right, right. It's not in the air, but it's there.
Yeah.
Fascinating, fascinating. Well, shore goldenrod is something that I like, because when you dig it up, you look at that matrix of roots, and you say, okay, I'm gonna cut the top, and I'm gonna put you in another spot, because I know what you're gonna do. So the combination of plants has been a mystery, and Georgina was not a botanic person, so it was good that I came along to kind of just, dapple here and there. Dave?
Are you still gonna have access to the North Bar and Camp Hero?
Yes.
While this is happening?
The Corps of Engineers said to me, so we're going to close it down for surfers for 2 years. And I said, yo. I said, you want nuclear winter? You're not going to close this thing down for any time. The surfers can navigate. Let the surfers alone. Just put up some signs and some fencing. You'll be fine. And 2 weeks later, they said, okay, Gary, we catch your drift, okay? So, no, the surfers will be able, they won't be able to walk in the construction area and paddle to Alamo. They won't be able to paddle to here, walk into construction. No, they'll have to paddle in from, their spot over by where they enter the point break. And North Bar is theirs.
North Bar was working today, that's where everyone was.
Yeah. Sir?
Greg, in the 60s, how come Bob Moses and Perry Dorier weren't part of the solution?
Because no one like Georgina had brought it to the light. It was in a work in progress between that little political thing at Dan and then her patent years ago, and she didn't have a place to apply her patent but on her own property, and she was Elvis in Rocky Point, But that Dan's paper article got her out of Rocky Point and got her to the place where she was going to make something. So it was a science that was being learned, and it was just not the time.
So this next project is supposed to last 73 years?
Well, no, that's not how the scientists look at it. It's 73-year storm protection. In other words, a 73-year storm, this protection would be no problem. All right, so you have 100-year storms, you have 500-year storms, you have 1,000-year storms. Okay, all those things come our way. We've only been testing weather for 150 years, so that will be up for grabs. But once this gets built, there will be a maintenance quotient to it. So it's not as if one storm comes and obliterates 63,000 ton of stone. It may cause a hiccup here and a hiccup there. That's why that 20-foot ramp that I insisted upon was important, because we'll get in and we'll fix that. And we'll live another day. We'll live to fight another day. And then, let's face it, Les Serkin, geologist, he wrote a book about the geology of Block Island. 2,000 years from now, Block Island's not going to be there. Okay? So whether you're talking geologic time or whether you're talking generational time, I'm talking generational time. We can keep this building here for 100 years without fail. With this new protection, if it goes in, let's go back to the recession rate, 1 foot a year. Mother Nature is going to have to take 63 ton of stone out, and then the recession rate starts again. You got 80 or 100 years right there. Or maybe if climate's getting weird, you got 50 years right there. So 100 years from now, I'll still be in the Historical Society, and I'll still be. I got a big bloody mouth and I ain't shut up, okay? So, but it's a storyline that should be shared. I thank you for coming. And it's a storyline that you can't write a script like this one, it's a hoot. So, thanks.
Thank you.